This year has been a year of really responding to and lifting up the voices of people with developmental disabilities in North Carolina in response to crises and challenges. This year started with Hurricane Helene and ended with the real cuts to Medicaid that go either from 3% all the way up to 10%. And we're just starting to feel those cuts, but throughout sort of the end of our annual report year, we were figuring out ways to really lift up the developmental disability community during an unprecedented, challenging time. North Carolina is a magnet for hurricanes. They hit our coast on a pretty regular basis, but what we don't expect is that our mountain west North Carolina will really be devastated by a hurricane. But that's what happened at the very end of September 2024. And I was very proud of our North Carolina Council on Developmental Disabilities and our larger disability community for coming together on this. And every day, and often twice a day, we were having video conference calls or conference calls, depending on what people's capacity was. And from that, we were able to make sure that every person who is on a tailored plan, which includes a lot of the developmental disability community, certainly anybody who's getting developmental disability state funded or federal services, was checked on. We made sure that all of the group homes were checked on and accounted for, and also that there were responses when people needed help.
We brought over 300 advocates to the legislature. We had over 20 speakers, really educating lawmakers on the dire needs of the community, and particularly what happens if those needs are not met.
And if I could just say, John, one of the things that I think we've really worked hard on is making sure that we're having bipartisan friendships. We've really built a close connection to members of both the House and the Senate on the Republican side and the Democratic side. And that really showed at our legislative day that folks came, and not only did they come to hear from us, but they knew us because we had built relationships with them. And I'm really proud in a time that feels very partisan that we have been so bipartisan and that we continue to work with all sides of the aisle.
If I could follow up with both Talley and John's comments about the legislative session in March, it was very encouraging to see how that has grown. This was the second year that we had done this. We intend to continue doing it until we have been able to truly address and finalize the elimination of our waiting list in our state. The real stories, both communicating the real variety of needs that our community has, as well as the very positive stories of when things work, what positive results can occur. And I think that's a very important point, how our community can become to be contributing citizens and with real jobs, and contributing to the economic output of this state.
And so our legislative day was a great way to try to meet both those short-term and long-term needs. But also we did a data report where we really asked Duke University, Dr. Michelle Franklin, to really go out and find all of the data that exists on developmental disability, so that when the legislature asks us a question, we can give as good of an answer as we can. We also asked her, what data should we be asking for that just doesn't exist right now? And then we also did an economic impact study in partnership with the ARC of North Carolina that said that for every dollar we put into a direct support professional, or other developmental disability service, another $1.17 to $1.63 is generated in that community. And why is that? Because when you pay a direct support professional, frankly, we don't pay them enough, but that little dollars that they have from that pay will go to the local gas station, it'll go to the local hardware store, it will regenerate over and over again. That dollar will regenerate again. And so I think we've also given not only the human reason for why we should do this, but also the economic reason for why it's so critical that we make sure we're meeting the needs of the developmental disability community, both in the short term and the long term. One of the things that we do well and that is so critical is really raise up the voices of people with disabilities and family members to people in power. And so just some of the ways that we've done that, we had, we're averaging 20 to 30 people at the beginning of the year in our policy meetings. We're now up to, the most recent policy meeting was about 120 people. And they got to meet with the head of Medicaid. They got to meet with someone from the governor's office. They've met with Republican legislators and Democratic legislators.
One thing that I think we've been at the forefront also is our inclusive post-secondary initiatives. The legislature last year provided about $14 million to about 14 post-secondary community colleges through the Access to Achievement program. And I was just on a call a couple of days ago, talking about how that has grown, and the hope is to be able to continue that effort to additional community colleges throughout the state. I would say also that the council provides a grant for leadership training. And it's exciting to see how individuals that have graduated from that leadership program have then been able to be part of some other of our initiatives. So that leadership training is working, and you're seeing the fruition of that through putting those individuals in leadership positions in other efforts. Our HBCU funding has provided wonderful, incentives to create some great programs that continue to grow.
In response to Marjorie, because she talked about the inclusive post-secondary education, one of the things that we've had to face, like everyone, is just a leaner budget. With inflation and increased costs, but also less money coming because there was more money flowing during COVID, we've just had less money. And so what I've been so excited about this year is not only that we've been able to grow our own initiatives, which are still so critical to our work, but we've been able to really leverage and really expand upon the initiatives that are happening throughout our state for the developmental disability community. So Marjorie mentioned the community colleges program. This is not something that we funded or even sort of originated from us, but we've been able to really sort of celebrate that, bring folks who are part of this to the governor's mansion, host a statewide education about this initiative, serve on the advisory committee for the initiative, and really sort of, I think, make North Carolina the absolute best state in the country for having community colleges for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Now, it's an early program. There are ways in which we're also giving some suggestions of ways that we think it can improve and grow, but that's our role. And so I've been proud of us, not just for the initiatives that we've grown out of our council's work, but also to really leverage some of the great work that's happening throughout the state.
And on the theme of community, our community living committee has been funding a grant to train law enforcement officers all over the state in terms of how to better protect and serve those with intellectual or developmental disabilities, particularly autism. And that project has now grown to include the entire Raleigh Police Department, which is absolutely huge. We've got over 800 officers.
Being able for our community to feel helping to empower them with their message. Their message is important. And I think people feel better when they're a part of the solution.
And just to add on to Marjorie, the impact of that empowerment. At one of the listening sessions, we had a state senator who was there, and that senator was going to only be able to stay for a little while. But the stories that she was hearing were so impactful, she could not feel like she could leave. She needed to hear this. And that was, I think, really impactful.
We had full rooms where people wanted to share, and often we went overtime in these public input sessions with folks telling us what they were experiencing, the fears they have often for what's going to happen if a family member passes and there's no one to care for an individual with developmental disability. But they also told us about what's joyful in their life, what is really giving them hope, and the extraordinary talents, whether it's the music we heard when we gathered with L'Arche in their jam session, and people singing to just all of the different ways in which people shared their stories was really extraordinary. And it's going to help us really build our 5-year plan. We didn't hear a lot that we didn't already know because we're so connected with our community, but people really wanted to share their own experiences and really connect it to the why of what we need to be doing at the DD Council.
My hope is that solving the short-term issues will set us up and give us a model for how to address the long-term issues, because they both have to be addressed. And what we're seeing in the short term, the negative impact is just a preview of what's going to happen in the long run. The thing that gives me hope is seeing advocates show up to the legislature as much as humanly possible. When we're there, they notice. We know that because they tell us. And I think the more we are seen, the more we will be able to really tackle these issues.
I think one of the things that we have to remember is that we've made extraordinary progress. So right now, I feel like we're being beaten up this year because we are facing cuts to Medicaid and unprecedented long-term challenges to Medicaid, a giant waiting list. But we also have more than 10,000 people now receiving some type of 1959 services. Yes, folks are maybe mostly getting case management and things like that right now. So we have some more to build on. We also got an unprecedented gain in pay to workers. Of course, that's under threat too right now. But each of those things took a lot of work and was progress that we built together. So that gives me real hope that we can also take on the challenges of today and tomorrow.
What brings me joy is working with a passionate group of individuals that really care and that want to make an impact. And we will continue to do so.
We have such an incredible community and a fun community. And every time I get to gather with folks with intellectual developmental disabilities and family members, when we just gather around the table, when we play or sing music together, it brings me joy and hope, and also reminds me why our community is so vital to the state of North Carolina. And so that's what gives me hope. And it gives me hope that a lot of our state leaders are interconnected with our community because they're not only our friends, but often they're our family members. And so I think that as long as we continue to remind folks this is about their neighbors, this is about their family, this is about their friends, I think we can make an extraordinary amount of progress. And the other thing that gives me hope is we have a great council. We have an extraordinary group of leaders, and they have really done a phenomenal job of really building a footprint in North Carolina that we can build on for the next years and decades.